Every leader has a decision-making style. And when it's working for you, it's the reason your business moves forward. When it's working against you, it's the silent chokehold that slows your growth, burns through your resources, time, ideas, money, and energy, and leaves your team waiting for direction. And so the problem with this is most leaders don't even see this pattern because these are the things that are running behind the scenes, your codes, your leadership code, which is also overlaid onto the time quadrant, which we'll talk about. And it's also overlapping with your nervous system defaults. So, hi, welcome. We are talking today about decoding how each leadership code makes decisions, and more importantly, how those decisions get made when the pressure is on. So by the end of this episode, you will see exactly where you might be, leaking time, ideas, money, energy, every single time you're making a decision. So if you're not familiar, the whole thing about this decoded leadership process is each personality type has a code. And we have 4 different archetypes. The first one is the producer. And so when we're talking about making decisions, the default for the producer is she decides fast in order to keep momentum and to avoid stalling. Because when we overlap this with the time quadrant, right, she lives in the money quadrant, which, it's money, but it's also success because she's wired to protect her revenue and her results above all else. And so how this overlaps with, your nervous system default is the producer is like when she's under pressure, it's fight mode, right? Fight, flight, fawn, freeze are the 4 defaults. And so she sits in the fight mode. And when we're looking at your nervous system default through the lens of decision making, right? Think of it like this, right? Pushing through decisions, right? Without pausing to really look at the ripple effects that are happening. And so when we do this kind of decision making in fight mode, right? Essentially, right, it protects your short-term gains because, as you're pushing decisions through, it's like, okay, decision made. But, in the long term, if you're not looking at it like an overall strategy, like, the 2,000-foot view or whatever they say, it's going to cause long-term inefficiencies. And so this is going to result in rework and even strained relationships. When you keep pushing and you have a team, the push will definitely burn out your team. And so we're not only talking about the cost of strained relationships, so to speak, but it's maybe the cost of attrition when you have to rehire someone who you completely burnt out. Then you have to factor in the cost of training and getting everybody on board. So again, there's a lot when it comes to decision making with these 4 archetypes. So the producer, again, is the first one that we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through all the archetypes today. So the fix for the producer is just to slow down a little, even if it's just 2%, And in that pause, what you're going to do is like just assess, because we're leaders, right? We're leaders, we're CEOs of our businesses. We slow down a little bit and really assess, okay, what if I make this decision now, how is it going to affect my business long term? Not just the short term gains that we can get right now, but how is it going to really affect the long term? So, and it really is just stopping real quick, stopping, smell the roses, and keep it moving. I mean, it's pause and then keep it going. Like you can sprint to the next decision, but when you're making a decision, pause just a little bit, So so the acronyms are PACE. And like, again, right, what is the pace of your business? What is the pace that you're running at when you're making decisions. So the activator is the A in this whole system. And so your default as the activator is saying yes quickly, right? Because you sit in the ideas quadrant and you're like, oh, yes, it lights you up. And you're like, yes, completely yes. And then when you have made that decision, it's like, oh, wait a minute, pivot midstream. And it's like, ugh, because something new tickled your fancy and you're like, ooh, yay, shiny objects, you know? Again, right, because you operate in the ideas quadrant on the time wheel, you get energized by starting, creating, like that creative force is yours. Like that's what drives your business, the creativity. But when we're also looking at the overlap with the nervous system default, so under stress, this can flip you into flight mode, not fight, right? Fight or flight is at the top of the wheel. So you end up chasing the new to avoid feeling stuck, right? It's that dopamine hit. Like, oh, fresh idea, let's go. And then when you're in the lull of the execution, which is on the opposite side of the wheel from your wheelhouse, right? You're like, oh, the execution piece, like I can't. So that's this whole process, right? We have to, one, understand our strengths so that we can decode them. And once they're decoded, like understanding where you fall in one of these quadrants, it's going to make your decision making so much easier. And this whole podcast is all about helping you as a leader to understand, okay, how do I do this in my business? So today we're talking about decision making. We're going to be talking about delegating and all of that, like in subsequent episodes. So stay tuned, and we're going to go through each archetype as we go, because, you know, my experience in like the so many years that I've been doing project management in corporate, and then as I've been operations managing my clients' businesses, I realized that this decision making is the crux. It's the make or break of every business. And once you're able to decode, you know, where you sit on the archetype wheel, it's like, oh, okay. As the activator, I get a lot of ideas. Knowing that, and like on the opposite side, right, the ideas versus execution. Like, okay, my weakness is execution. So I need to hire a team that's going to be able to run with the ideas and do the execution piece. Because a lot of times what we do in our businesses, we hire people who are very similar to us because, hey, we get along, we jive, like we're pinging ideas off of one another. Like this is so cool. And on the flip side, when we're not in the zone of, I need to really shore up my weaknesses. And that's why the time wheel sits in a quadrant, and on the opposite side of the wheel is your, you know, your opposite. So knowing that you need to hire the evaluator to help you with the execution pieces, like that's going to be, you know, the biggest bang in your buck when you're looking at team alignment. So again, right, the cost of the activator sitting in idea mode versus execution mode, you already know. Unfinished projects, right? How many things are sitting in your Dropbox graveyard? And then also team whiplash. Like, oh, let's do this. Oh, and like your team is working on something, you know, wait a minute, I think I want to do this instead. Let's pivot. And like you're famous for pivots, so just be honest. You're like, let's pivot. Like, oh, but you already paid your team to do this work, to go in this direction. So that's the thing, right? You're going to have to realize the cost of unfinished projects, right? Like half-finished projects, the team whiplash, like, oh, shucks, I thought we were here. Let's go over there. But the whiplash also leads to burnout. If you have a team that's like, you know, that they just get tired of it. Like they want to be appreciated for their work. They want their work to mean something. They want to see the finished product of this project. So you have to take that into account in your hiring process and team calibration. So again, oh yeah, I forgot, lost momentum. You lose momentum, right? Like when you're going in a direction, you're like, whoa, pivot. I was canoe paddling, growing up. Like I'm from Hawaii, so like canoe paddling, and like when we're all rowing together out on the open ocean, and you're like, yeah, like we're all moving in sync. And then it's like, oh, we have to turn, like, because most of the long distance races where you have to turn around a buoy and come back, like that turn, like you lose so much momentum in the turns. And if you're not shoring up your team to handle those pivots, like you just have to understand every time you pivot and you make a decision to pivot, you're just losing momentum. And if you're not calculating that cost into your overall business, you're going to get frustrated and say like, wow, like team cost is my highest cost. Why is that? And it's like, because you're paying hourly for your pivots and all of this work that you did to go in this direction. Now you're literally paying to switch directions. So a fix for your archetype, for the Activator archetype, is to apply a 24-hour cooling period when you make a decision. And if you're into human design, right, if you have an emotional wave to your or emotional authority to your human design, right, you understand we get into these emotional waves and we need this cooling off period, because a lot of times, like, woo, we got the hit, and then it's like, oh, maybe that was such a good idea. Like, oh, sorry, like, let's not do that. Let's take another direction. But if you say, hey, we're doing this thing, let's pivot, and then you wake up the next day and you keep pivoting, then you're going to pay the cost for that. And so before you commit to an idea, just give yourself a 24-hour cooling period, or even 12 hours. Look, 12 hours, I get it, but don't go into your Slack channel and be like, hey guys, I got this brand new idea. And then, like, who knows, in the afternoon it might fade. And then it's like, well, sorry, let's not, And so, and then also when you're looking at the way that you plan, the way you're planning everything out, define clear success criteria, right? When I make this decision, these are like the success criteria that I'm basing this decision against. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I get it. The B word, boundaries, for the Activator personality type is crazy, because I am also this type. But just having that will really shore up the costs in your business, because you probably know that you're bleeding money from all these decisions. Well, you know that you're bleeding money, but you're not sure where all your team costs are going to. This is where it's going to. So C is the connector, right? PACE, connector. So your default is you delay decisions and you gather input because, like, you want to make sure everyone on the team is heard, right? Because your highest priority is maintaining harmony. So how this works is you sit on the time quadrant of the time wheel. And so what lives in the time quadrant is relationships. And when I first created this whole ecosystem, it's like, how is time related to relationships? And how it came to me, like how it was downloaded to me, was when you look at time and you're like, where did the time go? You spent it with people. I mean, it could be with yourself, but time is spent with people, especially when you have time runaway. Like today, I was at the gym and I had some time runaway. Why? Because I was talking to my friend and we were in this like really cool conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta go. I'm late for an appointment. So, well, it was a Zoom appointment, of course. And so I just hopped on the Zoom call, sweaty, like tried to get as presentable as possible. And then like, hey, I'm here. Like, I'm on Zoom. You can't see me from the waist down. So it's fine, But again, right? If you look at your calendar, all of the time blocks, appointments, things that drain your time are relationships. So, right, that's why the harmony is super important for you as a person. And you have to create systems in your business that allows you to have that harmony, to be supportive of your team, of your people, but also not being dependent on that harmonization. Like you have to create that harmonization in other ways, and also what this looks like is having like super long team meetings where it's like, I get it. You want to make sure everyone's heard. You want to make sure that, we take all input from all parties. But at the end of the day, you are the leader and you make the decisions. And yes, as a leader, do we step on toes sometimes? For sure. For sure. But you have to know that this is your Achilles heel. The fawning is your Achilles heel. And so you have to build in something that will give you the speed and the momentum so that that peace and that harmony won't weigh you down. Like, not that it's not important, because again, this is your default. This is what lights you up. This is what gives you that, right? Having a team, having the community, the camaraderie, it really lights you up to have that. So you have to build that into your own business ecosystem, because if you don't, right, progress just stalls. It's like, hey, let's get everybody's input. And then when you have too many people's input, it causes confusion, because like, oh, but she said this and I think they want to do this. And like you just get so much input from all the places, it just causes confusion and you can't make your own decision. And you end up defaulting to like, what's the majority? But on the inside, as a leader, you already know what you want to do. And so you really have to come to that place like, how can I create boundaries around my decision-making processes? And like when you are like that indecisive, depending on the people that you have on your team, if you have a whole bunch of, people supporting people on your team, like that's their vibe, they'll love it. But even if they love it, they're still going to be confused by your indecision, because at the end of the day, it's like, can I just do my job? Can you just tell me what to do? Like, this decision making process is super stalled. And I love the meetings and I love getting to know you, and I love the stories and the team bonding, but like sometimes I don't need the backstory. Can you just tell me what I need to do so I can get to work? And again, you're paying for that, right? All the team meetings, the building of the camaraderie, right? These people are not working for free when they're on your meetings, right? If you have contractors that are getting paid by the hour, a 2-hour meeting times each person on your team times their hourly rate, like that meeting could end up costing you hundreds of dollars, especially if you're a verbal processor and you have the team just, sitting on a Zoom call with you, chatting. And like, of course, it's great to get input from your team to get all these ideas. But, if you're spending every team meeting brainstorming around every decision, the cost is just going to go way up for these team meetings. And again, if you're thinking like, okay, my team costs are bloated, they are inflated, take a look in this quadrant as well. Are they submitting timesheets that have like meetings? Like, are you paying more for meetings, or are you paying more for the execution piece? So again, so the fix for this is decide upfront what needs a voice, like what decisions actually need to be discussed as a team because it affects everyone. And like say, hey, we're pivoting or creating an SOP, like let's work on the SOP together because multiple departments or roles are involved, so we need everybody's input. And again, there are decisions that don't need everyone's input. Sometimes you just have to make the call as a leader and rip off the band-aid, so to speak, even if you might ruffle some feathers, hurt some feelings. At the end of the day, you like leaning into your leadership is going to help the team more than hurt it. But like, again, if you have to make a decision that you want to involve everyone in, just gather the input once. Like, don't be bring everybody on a team meeting, ping it out. Like, they'll be like, okay, I'm going to have a meeting with her. I'm going to have a meeting with her. Like, have all of these separate closed door meetings. And then you're still left at the end of the day to make a decision. And then the third thing is commit, right? You want to commit to the decision. Because you can have spending all of this time, money, energy, making these decisions. But if you haven't committed to it and you're like, oh yeah, let's go back around the room, and no, you need to commit. So that's your homework for this piece. Last but not least, we have our evaluators, and your default is waiting for everything to be perfect before acting. And like this, a lot of like what happens with the evaluator is you're evaluating things, you're evaluating decisions, you're evaluating cost, you're evaluating a lot of things. And so with all of this data gathering, it's like, okay, gather, and then you act. It's like you have to have something that will allow you to, yes, data gather to your heart's content, but where are you going to put like a taking action piece in all of that, that part? So why this is important. So the evaluator lives in the energy quadrant. And like when the energy quadrant, how that applies here, right? There's a lot of analysis paralysis that happens when you're gathering all the data, and it's like, okay, well, based on this, I should do this, but based on this, I should do this. And the data gathering back and forth. So it's similar to what we just talked about with getting ideas from people, but this one is more the data gathering space where you're getting your ideas from the data versus people. And, because you have the analysis paralysis going on, a lot of it is the mental energy just getting wasted. And on the flip side, to preserve your energy, you have to start focusing on how you can conserve your resources while also avoiding mistakes. Because here's the catch-22. Out of all of the quadrants, right, the last two that we talked about are the more slower moving, more calculated, of the archetypes. So you have to find this balance between resource conservation, but also your desire, your necessity to avoid making mistakes. So nervous system defaults for you under pressure, you tend to freeze, right? This is analysis paralysis again, though focusing more on the paralysis piece. And then when it's not wrong to be in analysis paralysis, but what it's costing you is missed opportunities, because sometimes you have to make fast. You have to move fast, make fast decisions. And when you sit on something too long, it's like, oh, should I not? Like, are we doing it or are we not? Time is still ticking. Time is still going by. So there are missed opportunities, unfortunately, when you do too much analysis. And that being said, right, if you get an idea, and what I've been told by my coaches and mentors is, God gives ideas out. And it's not like, okay, I have an idea, like let me sit on it. It's like, no. If you are slower than your competition to bring this new idea to light, then, you might miss the boat. again, missed opportunities. And not only that, when you're stuck too much in analysis paralysis, your team ends up sitting in limbo, and it's like, are we not? Are we doing the thing, or are we not? So, to kind of get over that, and I've had a lot of clients who live in this quadrant, and sometimes we just have to set it's a good enough threshold. Like, it's okay. Like, well, it's always okay. Is it time? Like, are we on a time crunch? Are we on a money crunch? What's the crunch? And sometimes it's, you know what, it is good enough to go out. It's not absolutely perfect, but where we are right now, we like, if we stay here and like not make a decision, again, missed opportunities, missed alignments, and you have to have a guidance system for how you're going to make a decision. Like, okay, well, if I am here and we need to make a decision, like, what is a sufficient amount of data that you need as a person to make a decision? Is it, okay, I need conversion rates from last launch to this launch, because the conversion rates for all my launches might take too long, but can I just get opt-in rates for last launch and this launch? And that way we have some kind of comparative analysis that I can do, makes me feel good, and okay, good, let's go. Like, so you have to decide what that is for yourself and give yourself a firm, like, okay. But this is where, as an evaluator, it's good because you're like, I have the data to make a decision about the data. Sounds so meta, but you know what I'm saying. At the end of the day, right, when we're looking at all the archetypes, you have to understand that your codes mean our decision-making styles aren't random. It's coded. They're coded. And I mean, when I say coded, it's hardwired into your system, and it overlaps on, your the time wheel and your nervous system. And here's what I found working with a lot of my clients, helping with operations support, whether it was full on, director of operations, or just project management. When I worked with clients who did not take their archetypes into consideration, they just ended up making choices that costed us time, money, and energy. And, they're looking at their expenses, not realizing why team cost is so high, why this is doing this and why that's doing that. And how I like to work with people is to first get them to understand their codes, right? Take the quiz, kylieota.com/quiz, get your code. And when we're inside of the decoded sessions, like what I do with my clients, the first thing that we do is we have the decoded session. So basically it's like an audit, like a leadership audit, where you sit, where you're leaking. We do like a full assessment, and it's exactly where your code is. Then we map it over the time quadrants, and we look exactly, okay, how much is this decision in the time quadrant costing you? Because there is a quantitative amount of cost for, these decisions. We laid them all out. But when I do private sessions with my clients, we actually get a dollar amount. And it's like, wow. And I get it. Like, a lot of times, the CEOs that I work with, the founders, they don't understand, like, because they have a lot of money coming in, a lot of money going out, they don't understand that there is a huge leak happening. And so, like, time, ideas, money, and energy, we look at each quadrant and see, okay, you're leaking here. And also the why it's leaking in this specific quadrant is because you're operating from this, nervous system default, fight, flight, fawn, freeze. And again, there's a primary, like if you are a producer, your primary is fight. So you will fight, and your driver is money. So, right, looking out at all of those factors, it's like, okay, based on these factors, we can get to the root cause that much faster. And I'm also into human design. So using your capacity codes, understanding your pace, right? Which of the archetypes you sit on, partnered with human design and just understanding all of those pieces. Can you imagine leading from a space where you understand your codes and like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. Why I'm making these decisions that I'm making, and actually have a way to nip those in the bud. And so, again, we don't want you second guessing or stalling out. So if this speaks to you, if you're like, oh my gosh, I need to know, one, go take the quiz, kylieota.com/quiz. And if it moves you, sign up for a decoded session, because in these sessions is where you're going to get so much gold. And if you know, like, something's off, something's leaking, like I have these energy leaks, I have money leaks, these sessions are what are going to help you figure that out. So anyway, go ahead, book your session, and we'll see you again next time on the Decoded Leadership Podcast.